Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and coach. You are on the Steady Coach. I just got off my call with Amy, who was our guest today, and I was so excited about our conversation that I jumped immediately to record an introduction so I can get this out to you guys as soon as possible. Amy is a clinical psychologist and has also recovered from vestibular migraine and PPPD. And she is here to share an incredibly clear account of exactly how she did it. Not just how she recovered from physical symptoms, but also how she dealt with some of the other types of symptoms that many of you are dealing with, like obsessing about your symptoms, constantly scanning for symptoms, and dealing with intrusive thoughts. Again, so many gems to take away from this conversation. Looking forward to your feedback on it. Please leave questions and comments below if you're on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Please give the podcast a follow if you're listening as a podcast listener. And you can also leave us a 5-star rating if you think we deserve it. Please enjoy this conversation with Amy. Hey, Amy, it's so good to see you again. Hello.
Hi, Yoni. How are you?
Hi. We just saw each other in person a few months ago, and I have to say that was better than seeing you on video, but I'm glad we can connect in some way, at least across the Atlantic.
Yeah, we did in London, which was amazing, with you and some other fellow your Dizziness community, which was fantastic.
I know.
So nice to give you a hug in person.
I know, right? I know. It's always a source of great joy that I can help people who are all so far away from each other, but at the same time, I feel deprived because I don't actually get to get those hugs when people get better and just actually watch you like flounce out of the room and go do stuff, right? Yeah. I just have to take the word for it.
I think we said how nice it was just to see each other from the
top. Oh my gosh, you have legs?
Yeah.
You have legs. I didn't know. I wasn't sure.
We're a human being.
All right. So we're here to share your recovery story. So why don't we just start with some background information on you to let people get to know you?
Sure. My name is Amy. I'm 39 years old. I live in the UK. I'm based in Coventry, which for those not living in the UK is near Birmingham in the Midlands.
Know, and we know there are a couple other countries there somewhere.
Exactly. So it's a town, but it's a fairly small town in Coventry, but I've lived all over the UK. I work in the NHS, so I work as a clinical psychologist with older adults. So I work with people with quite severe and enduring mental health issues, but also working with people with dementia and diagnosing dementia. So I do that part-time. And then the rest of my time, I look after my 2 young children, Maeve and Heath. So they are 5 and 3. So they keep me very busy as well.
They're part of the story too.
They are. So they're obviously a big part of my journey. And So that's the main headlines about me, I think.
Okay. We're going to definitely delve into how your work and background may have helped or hindered you during your recovery process. And I'm always really curious to hear people's take on that, especially coming from a psychology background, because you and I know have privately chatted about the fact that many very well-educated psychologists are trained very much in a cognitive behavioral paradigm, which is a little bit different from the types of things people need to do to get better from neural circuit dizziness and symptoms that are neural circuit in nature.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there was definitely some things I could apply from my knowledge as a psychologist, but there was also some of it that presented challenges because it just didn't quite fit with the recovery model.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. That was the dramatic answer that you could have ever made. Okay. We'll get into it. So
yeah, I'm sure it will come up later down the interview.
Sure. So let's get started with how the symptoms came on, when, and what was going on in your life.
Okay. So I've had to reflect back a little bit because it was actually coming up for 2.5 years ago now when my dizziness...
Which is so great.
journey began. I know it's crazy how time passes you by. But yeah, at the time I started to notice dizzy sensations in late November, early December 2022. So at the time I was on maternity leave. I was about 7 months into my second maternity leave with my daughter, Maeve. Everything was seemingly going fine, other than the usual challenges you get with having a newborn baby and navigating, also having a 2, nearly 3-year-old. So I was obviously a stay-at-home mum at the time. I was a primary caregiver. And at the time, my dizziness very much started as quite vague, transient symptoms. I wasn't somebody that had a big bang event where I woke up and I had spinning vertigo, or I had something very in your face, if you like. It for me was a very gradual onset of symptoms that over time became more pronounced and more intense. So when they very first started, because I was in this period of postpartum sleep deprivation, my menstrual cycle had just returned, I kind of just passed it all off as that. And the GP very much agreed with me. So I had these symptoms on and off throughout November, December. But in between, I was able to function as normal. I didn't give them too much airtime in terms of focusing on them when they weren't there. But it kind of got to the new year. And I was unfortunately also hit with quite a severe flu in between Christmas and New Year. And the symptoms very much increased in intensity between that period. And then they kind of remained at higher intensity following having that virus. Mm-hmm. So I think at that point was when a bit more fear set in, because rather than this pattern of them being quite mild, being quite transient, very much coming and going and being vague, all of a sudden they were starting to become a bit more obvious and a bit louder, if that makes sense.
And what kinds of symptoms were you experiencing at this point?
I wrote a few notes, actually, again, just to kind of remind myself more than anything. But like I said, I found them quite hard to explain. So I remember when I first went to the GP office, I was trying to explain them. So it's quite, for myself, quite a disorientating feeling, quite lightheaded. So almost like I was existing in a bubble. I'd often would notice them in very busy, overstimulating environments. Obviously, I was spending a lot of time in soft plays with my children. I'd done a lot over Christmas. Incidentally, my first maternity leave was in lockdown in COVID. So I think my second maternity leave, looking back, I was very much in go mode. So I was just kind of doing this activity, doing that activity. And I started definitely to notice symptoms were more pronounced when I was out and about, when I was socializing with others. And then I started getting quite a lot of brain fog. So I would notice kind of in social interactions that I just couldn't concentrate very well. I was just I was noticing sensations during those types of environments. After long car journeys, I started to notice that I felt quite unwell for a while. I'm always someone that's had motion sickness, but on short journeys, I'm usually okay. But actually, interestingly, I started noticing after most car journeys, I started to kind of be noticing this kind of odd after swaying sensation for quite a while. That was quite a trigger. Oddly, not when I was in motion. So I never tended to experience symptoms when I was either walking or actually driving, but actually it was either afterwards or when I was more just standing still. That was more when the kind of, it felt like I was more swaying in my environment, if that makes sense.
Total sense. Yes.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily what people maybe would classically describe as dizzy, but it was not like you're describing, just being off and sort of disoriented, having a sensation of movement, maybe where there wasn't any. And then when you were in motion, it seemed more normal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was almost as if my head wasn't catching up with my body, if that makes sense. So it was almost like there was just some sort of lag. Everything just didn't feel quite stable in space.
Okay.
If that makes, I find it really, even now, really hard to verbalize eloquently how it felt, which I think can be a common experience with.
It's very common. And it's one reason I'm so vocal about how dizziness is different from other symptoms sometimes, not in terms of folks listening to this, not necessarily in terms of what you need to do about it ultimately. If it's a neuroplastic or neural circuit issue, it's the same as other things. But the fact that it's so vague, it makes you question your own sanity. It's not like if you have a hurting elbow or back, you don't go, am I insane? You just say, oh, I have a hurting elbow or back, right? But when you're like, yeah, it's like kind of like I'm not real, but I am real, but I feel like I'm moving even though I know I'm not. Like what?
I was like, I know I don't feel right, and I know it's not vertigo. I know I'm not. The world isn't spinning. So I almost very quickly started to second guess. What's going on here? Is this in my head? Is this a thing? Is it not? I haven't had anything to really make these symptoms start. So I was quite confused at that time.
Confused, and was it starting to interfere at that point with your daily life activities?
Not so much at that point, but it was starting to interfere, I think, cognitively. So I think, again, being a psychologist, I'm very aware of an anxiety fear cycle and how avoidance can feed that. So I think I wasn't avoiding necessarily, but equally I was perhaps starting to do the opposite. So I was perhaps starting to white knuckle quite quickly. Mm-hmm. So I think I was very much in a position of, I'm not going to let this stop me doing anything. And particularly because up until that point, I'd been quite enjoying my maternity leave. I think I was definitely starting to get more fearful and frustrated with the symptoms. I think I was very much like, I'm just going to try and keep calm and carry on, even though I don't understand what they are, if that makes sense.
Yes.
But then perhaps what that led to is not very more anxiety in those situations.
Okay.
And I think in a way I felt responsible for my children's well-being as well. So I think I was almost subjugating my well-being to make sure they were going to the activities, to make sure they were still living as normal life as possible. To me, it wasn't an option to step back and do less at that point. It was very much, we have to carry on here. The show must go on. So I think I was just hoping these symptoms would
just go away.
Miraculously go away and life would resume as normal, if I'm honest. Yeah.
And that's not what happened.
No, that's not what happened. No.
Surprised, everyone. So things started to intensify at some point.
Yes. So I had the flu, unfortunately, as well, which definitely increased sensations quite significantly. So I decided, I think it was about kind of January, February time. They weren't abating. This was about a month since I'd had the flu as well. So I feel like I'd given it enough time for the virus to kind of clear my system. And I have had some health anxiety in the past. So again, knowing what I know about health anxiety, I was trying to not feed into that loop of over reassurance seeking. I was trying not to Google, but again, that kind of left me sat with some of my own thoughts and feelings around what was going on. So, I was like, if I was advising a patient that was worried about a symptom, I would advise go and get it ruled out physically. So that's what I went with the intention of doing with the GP. And to be fair, they were pretty good. So they kind of agreed my menstrual cycle had come back. They really validated the symptoms, and they said, these are real symptoms that you're experiencing. People can experience dizziness for lots and lots of different reasons. So let's do our due diligence and let's do some checks. So at that time, I had a full workup of blood tests, and I had a heart monitor. They were the tests based on what I'd said that they decided to do. And to be honest, everything came back clear other than I had low vitamin D. So they prescribed some medication. And there was also a conversation around my general mood, my postpartum. There's quite a lot known now, obviously, about kind of postpartum depression and anxiety. So there was perhaps a bit of a suggestion, is this stress related? Is this mood related?
How do you feel about that?
I think I feel mixed, because I think there obviously was some things going on in hindsight. And it's really good that a GP was acknowledging from the off that perhaps this isn't just physical. That was really good. But again, it just didn't fit. It just didn't land, calling it anxiety.
Of course, that's exactly right. It's very invalidating. And obviously, anxiety and neural circuit dizziness are intertwined, but you're just one of many people I've spoken to who said, when there was a suggestion that this might be related to stress and anxiety, I didn't want to hear it because my symptoms were so clearly physical and there was something so clearly wrong. And that's why I just wish physicians knew how to communicate this in a way that is brain based. Like, it's not that, oh, you're stressed and you're making it up, but actually that stress changes how your brain operates and it can actually affect sensory perception. So not to say that would have made a difference at the time, but I'm not surprised to hear it wasn't something you were thrilled to hear.
Yeah. And again, as a psychologist, I think it's changed how I explain things to clients now. I see clients with chronic pain and other sensations, sometimes dizziness. And I think I must admit, I missed out that fundamental explaining to people sometimes that can perhaps have made it feel, is this in my head? Is it
right.
just anxiety? So I think it's been a huge learning for how I explain these things for people as well.
Did they make any specialist referrals for you, or did you at that point drop the medical testing?
They didn't, no. So when the testing came back, again, I went kind of 2 or 3 months where, again, symptoms were present, but there was this kind of ebb and flow of them. So sometimes they were more intense than others. And then eventually, where does that take us up to now? So that takes us up to about spring, summer 2023. And then I got COVID again.
Oh.
So again, another virus.
Yeah.
And symptoms again latched to having the virus, and symptoms again really ramped up at that point. And I would say it was probably at that point that symptoms really became more constant.
Yeah.
And we had a holiday in Spain, and I was only about a week recovered from COVID and being clear. And I remember that holiday being very hypervigilant of symptoms. That internal scanner for symptoms at that point had really turned on. So when I returned from Spain, that was when I booked a private ENT appointment, because I thought, I'm no longer reassured that this is just hormones or just postpartum. And this has now been going on, on and off, but generally getting worse for the last 6-7 months. So I am now happy to kind of pay private, because I knew waiting in the NHS, that could be another year or so.
Sure.
So yeah, I had that appointment following that, and he then ran some kind of basic balance tests. Kind of had me walking up and down. He kind of looked in my eyes. He didn't order any additional ear tests, given I didn't describe an initial event, the vertigo event. He said we could, but based on your symptoms, I am quite confident diagnosing vestibular migraine or PPPD. And he's the first person that had mentioned either of those diagnoses to me at that point.
Yeah. Okay. So for people to know, this was not necessarily wrong to do, because vestibular migraine and PPPD are both diagnoses that are based on symptoms. So, I mean, that fits with what you were experiencing at this point.
Yes, absolutely. And I went away and looked at the criteria for vestibular migraine and PPPD. I had come across PPPD, interestingly, but I'd been a bit avoidant at looking at the literature on it because I'd read a couple of articles and...
Oh, it's scary. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, because my history of health anxieties, very quickly, I think I rejected that diagnosis because I was aware that some of the literature wasn't very positive about outcomes and management of it. So when I heard that, it was a very mixed reaction from myself, really. Again, it was like, okay, there's somebody acknowledging it's more than just anxiety or just hormones. However, I've been given a diagnosis that I'm now not sure what on earth
can be done
to do with. And I was quite surprised that I'd been labelled with something that potentially was going to be chronic.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when some people are given that diagnosis, there's some relief with it. But for myself, it's probably not the overwhelming feeling I felt.
I think you're in good company. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because when you're given a diagnosis of like, oh, you have this kind of illness and here's the treatment and this is going to fix it or cure it, that's one thing. But with vestibular migraine and PPPD, people are often flat out told this cannot be treated. It can only be managed. You're stuck with this forever. Why would you feel any differently about it at that point? And I mean, I think you yourself are evidence that that's simply not accurate, what people are told, you and the other 50 plus people I've interviewed. But at the same time, this is what people are often told. So again, not surprising that this was not a relief for you to get this diagnosis.
No, and I was still breastfeeding at the time. So obviously I was very mindful about what medications I was allowed to take. So he offered me a referral to a physiotherapy for some vestibular rehabilitation, which I agreed to. And then he also spoke about some medication options, which I think were antidepressants.
Yep,
quite strong
SSRIs
ones.
and SNRIs.
Like, yeah, but at the time I said, well, whilst I'm still breastfeeding, I'm obviously a bit wary about trying medication. It's perhaps something I'll consider in the future if symptoms continue, but yeah, that's not really an option for me at the moment. And then I remember very clearly asking him kind of what, in your experience of people that have walked through the door with that you give this diagnosis to, what's the outlook? And he said, it was again kind of vague, for most people it kind of gets better in my experience, but there wasn't any indication as to how that was done or what might help that beyond some either kind of vestibular rehabilitation or medication.
Yep. This is what I go on soapboxes all the time, because even if someone's more conservative than I am and says we should only follow the randomized control trials, or there aren't really randomized control trials, but there are open label trials. Even those studies suggest that CBT at the very least should be used in addition to vestibular rehab. That there's a huge acknowledgement in mainstream literature that fear avoidance, hypervigilance, et cetera, are playing a role here. And so it just disappoints me. And it disappoints me in particular because you're so highly educated. You're not just some random person who doesn't know anything about mental health or CBT. I mean, you happen to be a specialist in this, and yet that still wasn't communicated to you that this could be potentially playing a role. That's so frustrating for me to hear.
I know. Even if I actually went away and found the literature myself, because I'm I guess lucky enough.
Because you're like that.
I like reading journals in my spare time.
Yes, in your spare time. I'll read this instead of my morning newspaper. Okay, so you walk out of there. I imagine you're feeling rather defeated. And what happens to the symptoms at this point? And what's daily life like at this point when things are bad?
So I had returned to work a couple of months earlier as well. So I was working part-time again at that point. And work was really difficult, if I'm honest, when the symptoms were very present. I was really, really struggling. I felt like I was getting to the point where it was taking all my energy just to get through the workday. So that kind of became my focus, kind of focus on the basic needs of the children, making sure their needs are met and getting through work. But I was noticing that was getting harder and harder to keep up this persona of I'm okay. And again, I was in a brand new job. I'd moved NHS trust, so I'd completely moved location. So I was settling into a whole new team, a whole new environment. I think I was just very mindful of, I don't want to go off sick. I've been there 2 months. This is not a great first impression. You know, I'm somebody that's just my whole life so diligent and
well, no,
work.
Really? This part of I have yet to interview someone with neural circuit dizziness who's like, yeah, I just never really gave much of a darn about anything. I was really chill about everything. You mean you're somewhat neurotic? Okay, welcome to the club.
Yeah, rather type A about things. So again, there was this white knuckling still, even though there was this recognition this was getting harder and harder. And I think at that point was when I started to also notice, again, a lot of the cognitive symptoms. And I started to experience, I don't want to call it OCD. I don't know what perhaps you label it, Yoni, but this constant hypervigilance, this constant narrative of catastrophic thoughts around this.
Yeah. Did it come with a compulsion to check or to research or to do something about it, or was it just a pattern? Yeah. So it was. Yeah. So I have a term for it. I call it neural circuit dizziness induced obsessive compulsive disorder, or NCD induced OCD for short. It's a thing. And I just want to be clear for people to hear this. So you mentioned you'd had health anxiety kind of mildly before all this happened. You did not have OCD before this happened. If someone has, even people with no history of anxiety, but even who've had just kind of like little worries here and there, maybe a little more prone to anxiety, the dizziness itself brings on physiologic anxiety that's just, it's basically a side effect of being disoriented. Your system goes, holy crap, I'm in danger. And so it ramps up anxiety. And at some point your brain's like, what do I do with all this anxiety? And it can get stuck in kind of an OCD pattern. And it's not that you actually had or have a mental health condition. It's part of neural circuit dizziness. But I'm so glad you're mentioning this, and I'd love for you to describe it further, because I think so many people listening to this are going to identify with this particular symptom.
Yeah. So I think, again, once I had a label of PPPD and vestibular migraine, it almost gave me something to Google.
Oh.
So up until that point, I'd been quite rigid and strict because I didn't really know what to Google beyond hormones postpartum and some dizziness and causes of that. But I think as soon as you're given a label, you can go to town with that, right? So you can, and like I say, at this point, I hadn't discovered you. I hadn't really entered into the body-mind recovery sphere. So I knew where to look. I knew journal articles. I knew and like I say, the overwhelming literature that I read was a narrative of this is chronic. This is going to be something that that you've got to learn to live with rather than recover from. And I think that then really sent me into a bit of a spiral.
Yeah.
But I think also then I was just, because I'd read about also like CBT and other things, I went very into a fix-it problem-solving mode as well, which perhaps then led to these looping thoughts. I just felt like I was just constantly trying to work it out. If I could just work it out, if my brain could just work out what was going on, then maybe it would stop. I think that was just my threat system at that point was just so high, and I didn't know what else to do, that my mind was just overthinking. And then, like you say, I started some checking behaviors. So, you know, if I woke up and I felt okay, I'd then immediately, my first thought was, am I okay? Am I okay? And I'd kind of check my head, or I'd go and, or when as soon as I went into a shop, I'd be like, am I okay? Am I okay? And then, of course, symptoms would pop up because they were so there, you know, that idea of predictive coding, we get more of what we focus on. And I became my world became very small, I think, at that point, because that's all I could think about. I was just stuck in this.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you're talking about this, because I'm not sure if you're quite ready to talk about how things started to get better, but people ask me about this all the time. Yoni, I have these intrusive thoughts and I want them to stop, and I don't know what to do with them. And the more I try to fix them, the louder they get. And but then when I don't try to fix them, then they just flood me. What am I supposed to do with this? So I'd really love to hear your advice on that, but I can remember that for when we get to the part where you actually start feeling better.
I'll definitely bring that in. And it fits with what I did with the dizziness symptoms, to be honest.
It's the same thing.
Went under the same umbrella. Yeah, it's not good that you necessarily need to do something totally different with these thoughts. You've just got to see them as one and the same thing.
Good. Okay. Well, then, so if you're hearing this and you're like, okay, what did she do about it? We're coming. We're coming there next. But before we do that, so things are just getting worse and worse. You're now not dealing just with physical symptoms. You're also dealing with these cognitive symptoms that are also, I'm sure, eating up a lot of your emotional energy. You're trying to keep it together as a mom. You're trying to keep it together with work. And at what point do things either just get to the absolute worst, or do they start to get better? Because this sounds pretty bad already.
Yeah, so we were probably about a year in at this point. So again, we were coming up to November, Christmas 2023. And I would say that's when I hit rock bottom. I was having panic attacks most days. I was, like I say, waking up. I was having to sit in the car and psych myself just to go into a grocery store. I've never had social anxiety, but I was finding just sitting in the restaurant really difficult, just engaging in just basics, really. So I had to go off work at that point. You know, my job, you can't help other people when you're in that state. And I think I reached the point where I was like, I'm not doing anybody any good. You know, I can't be a psychologist for anybody else when I'm here. So I took the decision to go off sick, and my work were amazing. They were really understanding, actually. But then that left me with obviously all this time. So on the one hand, I felt some relief that I'd done that. But on the other hand, I was then, I think, less inclined to go out, or other than kind of caring for the children. I then had all this time again to kind of let the thoughts and feelings kind of marinate. So double-edged sword, I think, isn't it? Kind of going off work.
Definitely. And so people listening to this also, you need to do what you need to do, obviously, but at the same time, neither one is is the easy way out. Let's put it that way, because they both have disadvantages of their own.
Yeah, I would agree. But yeah, at that point for me, it was the right decision.
So at what point did you find out that actually maybe there were things you could do, and this wasn't something you were going to have to just live with? I mean, and it sounds like, again, just continued to worsen no matter what you were doing.
Yeah, it seemed the more I was trying to do, the more intense the symptoms felt, which again felt counterintuitive. Because like I say, I was using some psychological strategies. I was trying to thought challenge some of the catastrophic thoughts. I was trying to, where possible, expose myself still to situations as in a CBT sense, hoping the panic would go down. But I was so symptom focused. I was still very much, I think, at that point, viewing the symptoms and sensations as having an element of anxiety and fear, but fundamentally viewing them as something that must be got rid of as quickly as possible for me to move forward. I just wanted them gone. It was as black and white as that. And that was keeping me quite stuck, I think. So the turning point for me was I came across the work of Alan Gordon.
Yes.
I read Claire Week's book.
Yes.
Hope and Help for Your Nerves.
Yes. Yes. Highly recommended. Yes.
So I think I discovered both of those people a couple of months before yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that really started to give me a light bulb moment and a framework to start to understand the fear symptom, fear cycle more, and how that was creating a loop. And it started to introduce me to the ideas of neuroplasticity, and that actually that these symptoms can be rewired. So I think Alan Gordon was really the first person that I come across that I had really engaged with in that sense and got on board with. And I remember that gave me a sense of hope. However, it was more geared towards chronic pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it, again, didn't quite fit with my sensations. And then I think I came across you and your community, because I think I was reaching the point at that point where I was able to engage with the diagnosis a bit more and accept the diagnosis a little bit more than reject it. And I think I'm in one of my Googling sessions, I must have just come across yourself. And I think I'd come across you before, but again, I was a bit avoidant about it. Because again, PPPD, vestibular migraine, I just wasn't ready. I think, yes. But I must have been just finally ready to click on a play. And I can't remember exactly what video it was. And again, just light bulb moments were going off. I was like, you're describing me. And I think that's the first time then I started to really learn about neural circuits and neuroplasticity in regard to chronic dizziness and how that can create chronic dizziness.
Yes.
As a cycle.
Yes. I was wondering about how it was when you came across Alan Gordon's work, because Pippa, she recovered from vestibular migraine before I had my YouTube channel. So she had to make that leap of faith without having someone confirming, no, this really is the same thing. And I think that probably takes a ton of courage. So I'm also particularly impressed with you being able to do that. Again, I know you did find my stuff, but before then you were already open-minded about that. And I don't know that is a given for someone who had been trained in psychology, because again, in many cases in psychology, people are trained in doing the things that you were already doing and are very focused in particular on management, not on treatment of symptoms like these. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, again, I can't remember how I discovered Alan, but I come across him, and yeah, and I think some of the work that I do, luckily, is a bit ACT-based as well, so acceptance and commitment therapy-based, yes. Which again is based on, the idea of, rather than challenging thoughts and cognitions that we have, is trying to allow, which I think did set me up nicely perhaps for some of this work, which yes. I'll talk more about. So
yes, let's do that. let's talk about what you actually did, because this is, of course, the number one question. People, first of all, want to hear, okay, maybe the symptoms that I have are things that overlap with what she had, but then they're like, okay, what'd she do about them? So what did you do about them, Amy? What'd you do?
Another question. I found you. No. So yeah, like I said, I think few notes about what I did really, but essentially the first step I think was this idea of acceptance and buy-in. So to go from, and it is a paradigm shift, it's not going to happen overnight, to go from this idea that there's something biological, structural, to there's nothing actually wrong with you structurally or biologically, but there's a loop going on that you can't see. There's a neural circuit going on. So I think for me, and again, I'm one of these people that's quite academic and I like to absorb knowledge. So I did find that helpful to just at that point really learn about what was going on in the brain. So before I trained as a psychologist, I was a neuroscientist. So for me, that
I was going to ask, oh, this is just, isn't it fascinating? I'm not going to let us divert to that topic because it'll just go off the rails very quickly. But but everything that I say, the predictive coding and central sensitization, those principles are very well supported in modern neuroscience research now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've done studies where literally, again, neuroplasticity rewiring, that you can literally see the nerves moving, which again, I found quite reassuring because the work's slow, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but you've just got to trust. Rewiring takes time. So that was a big thing for me, to trust the process. So I think at that point, I was very much coming from that perspective. So like I say, I engaged very much with your free course. I read Alan Gordon's work. I was trying to reframe sensations through more the lens of safety. So I was trying to engage in some of the somatic tracking work. I was trying to get back to doing activities, but more so from a corrective experience standpoint rather than white knuckling. So I think at this point, it's important to say you need some sort of structure and routine. And I think this is where your course, Yoni, really helped me in recovery, is it gave me a direction, because when you're so fearful and being led by that, recovery can just feel so chaotic. So you need to have some sort of routine and structure to hang recovery on. So I think at that, particularly being off work, you've lost all structure, haven't you? So I think I really started to focus on that, just getting back to things, but in a very graded way. And I went on to work with the wonderful Sam Miller, who you know as well, Yoni.
Of course. Yes. Sam is a dear friend.
Yeah.
Yes.
She always said to me, structure your day with what you can do on your worst day, not on your best day, and stick to that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. And don't let yourself down.
Don't set yourself up to fail.
Yes.
Don't white knuckle. There's no shame in dropping right down in your activities. And it's like the hare and the tortoise. You ironically will get back to doing those things quicker if you grade it.
That's exactly right. And it seems very counterintuitive to people. They have all sorts of reasons why they can't do it that way. And I get it, because you have to, but that's why acceptance has to come first. This is the truth of the matter, this is what my brain is doing right now. My brain cannot balance. It's not understanding sensory information. That is the truth of the matter. Right now, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Only when we accept that's happening, and that it's possible to, not just possible, your brain will inevitably rewire, but you need to set it up to do it. Then you can start, once you've reached that point with both of those things, then you can start to accept where you're at and start building from there. I think that's one big pitfall of recovery. people don't do what you just described, they'll really push themselves. And I am with certain stages. I had a video recently where I talked about stage 1 through 4. I don't know if you saw the conversation with me and Sam. Hopefully you're not doing much of this mind body watching stuff anymore. But basically, I think for someone who's had who very recently got symptoms and it was just related to outside stress, pushing through and realizing there's nothing wrong with me is awesome. Totally fine. But for other people, if you try that, let me just say this to everyone listening. If you tried that and it's not working, like Amy, you tried that diligently and it did not work.
Yeah,
exactly. No. So then we know it's not the right strategy. Then we take this opposite strategy. We say, okay, I need to do this in a more structured way. I need to meet myself where I am right now, knowing that where I am right now means nothing about where I'm going to be in a month. It just means that this is where I'm at right now. Take the pressure off.
Yeah. Otherwise you're resisting. It's just resistance. You need to meet. Acceptance is about, you don't have to like it. Acceptance isn't to like.
And it doesn't mean forever.
I did not like it. I didn't like the symptom. Right. I didn't like having to slow down, but I recognized as part of acceptance, I am here. This is my reality. This is my present experience. And the only way out of this is to meet myself where I am at now. I cannot compare to what I was a year ago, 2 years ago. Right now, this is me, and this is what I have to work on.
And that means nothing about where I'm going to be in the future. No. This is where I'm right now. So acceptance, I think people get confused. When we say accept, we don't mean, okay, just roll over and give up. That's not what we're saying at all. We're just saying, tell yourself the truth about what's happening right now. That's it.
Yeah. And that will come with frustration. That will come with at times, that will come with feeling guilt. That will come with lots of other emotions and uncomfortable emotions, but that still doesn't mean that's exactly what you need to do. So yeah, like I said, I think at that point, all of that stuff massively helped me. I would say that got me to the point probably 60-70% over time, when I was eventually, I'd learned about all of the cycles. I'd learned about how I likely got stuck in chronic dizziness. I was starting to view symptoms through more the lens of safety where possible. There was still fear coming up at times, but I would say I wasn't as fearful knowing all of that. But I was still getting flares, and I think I got stuck at about 70-80% recovery, which I think is when I then joined your community, Yoni. Yes. I think that was probably, kind of spring. What year are we even in now?
2020. Yeah. So now it's 2025. So it would have been spring 2024.
Yes.
Over a year ago now.
Last year. Yeah. Probably about 18 months ago. Mm-hmm. And I thought I might just need that additional, what am I missing? What is not kind of clicking for me here?
I have a feeling I know what I told you. I'm curious to hear what message you received when you joined.
I think your membership was just so wonderful because everyone was just so supportive and everyone was at a different point in recovery. But I think that was finally the point where I started to focus less on just the symptoms, and I started to get really curious around what was driving the symptoms. Why now? Is there a deeper meaning here? And again, I think I always knew deep down there was some of that, but my conscious brain, my ego-driven brain, my brain that just wanted to fix things as quickly as possible, didn't want to buy into that. So again, I think I had that initial paradigm shift of going from this is something biological, hormonal, whatever, to perhaps this is not. And then I think my second huge shift in recovery was this idea that are symptoms just symptoms? Or are they a communication for something else?
Yes.
Which again opened up this epiphany, but also opened up this, okay, I've got another round of recovery to go. But I felt that for me, it was needed to get me to that 100%. And, you'll know more about this with the people that you work with. Not everybody might need that. What I did in the first stages, maybe enough.
You are describing this so clearly and so eloquently. I'm just having a happy meltdown here. So it's just beautifully described. And this is just such a good, hopeful message for people, because I think you'll know if you're focusing on the symptom side of recovery, and that gets you to 100%, goodbye. Have a good life. There's nothing wrong with you. But when it stalls, then it probably means, and this is again coming back to that video that I referenced earlier. I have a video on the stages of neural circuit syndrome, again based on work that I've done with Sam. So it's something we kind of co-created, and then I made into my own thing. But the idea being that for some people, the stress bucket is just full of stress from the outside stuff. And once you deal with the symptoms and the stress is gone, you don't have a bunch of other work to do. But for other people, the reason the bucket was full of stress is because there was a lot of other stress that had nothing to do with like little life stress things. And so those little life stress things that happened initially may be gone, but your bucket's still full and it's still keeping symptoms going. And often that has to do with your relationship to yourself and your relationship with other people. So not knowing anything specifically about you, I'm wondering what you found some of the components of your stress bucket to be that you had to address.
I had, like I say, spent years not just white knuckling symptoms, I don't think, but white knuckling my whole life. Right from a young age, I think. I was highly achieving, highly academic. And I think I went through life very much with that high achieving, perfectionistic narrative, thinking they were probably personality traits of mine, rather than perhaps viewing them as sometimes defenses or ways of blocking or shutting down vulnerabilities or core emotions. I haven't got any significant trauma with a capital T. Some people that get these symptoms have, but I didn't go back and delve into every single childhood experience I'd ever had. But for me, it was about, and again, this is the work both with yourself and with Sam that was absolutely fundamental, is recognizing that I was somebody that had certain traits and even anxiety. I was somebody that probably would have been labeled somebody with generalized anxiety disorder because I was a chronic overthinker and over worrier. But actually, I began to view all of this as underfeeling or attempts to sometimes shut down how I really felt. And I started to view the symptoms as a communication with support that some of this stuff was ready to come to the surface and be felt and be healed. So this led to a huge reframe in symptoms. I think up until that point, I'd had a very practical cognitive approach to recovery still, and I hadn't quite grasped the emotional component of it, that feelings are there to be felt. And even though I was a psychologist and I helped lots of other people feel their feelings, I actually wasn't very good at feeling my own, which again came with its own
sort of, yes.
The irony niceness of it.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think there's a bit of a conflict in the body-mind space from what I've learned subsequently. You know, I'm in this space now. I'm starting to teach some of the stuff myself. And I got a bit confused. Are symptoms an attempt to divert and shut emotions down?
Mm-hmm. Or
are they a helpful communication coming up from below? But again, in the end, I kind of thought, I think it's both and. And I think as long as I'm viewing these symptoms as messengers,
signals, not noise.
Signals, yeah. And as long as I'm kind of starting to see them as something that's being created by me, for me, that's trying to do it in a helpful way. It doesn't always feel helpful, but they're trying their hardest to get me to become a more authentic person, or to stop doing certain things that are constantly filling up my capacity curve, then, okay, I've got to start listening. Otherwise, these symptoms are just going to keep getting reordered.
Mm-hmm.
And that, for me, then made sense why I was doing a lot of the other work, but I was plateauing and still getting some flares.
Yes. And so this, bringing us back to a point we were talking about earlier, it sounds like with the intrusive thoughts and some of the compulsive drive to fix or to ease the anxiety, it sounds like you viewed that exactly the same way. Oh, when that's happening, that's a side effect. That's a symptom. There's something underneath that needs my attention.
Yes, exactly that. And again, I had to do that with the support of a therapist and yourself, to really recognize that overthinking was just an attempt of my conscious brain to shut down what I was feeling in my body.
Mm-hmm. So you had to start practicing feeling,
authentically feeling in my body, not in my mind. This became the key to recovery for me, was not just accepting, but allowing whatever was coming up and trying not to shut it down with some sort of defense.
So
and start,
Go ahead. You finish your sentence and then I have a question about that.
And I was just going to say, just starting to recognize when I was acting in the present from an authentic place versus perhaps when I was acting from a position of discomfort, or when I was perhaps starting to act from a position of, that was more ego driven.
Got it. So I want to connect. So I'm going to say what I was going to say shortly, but I'm going to connect this up for people. So people will sometimes say, like, why do I need to feel feelings? And you can, I'm very open-minded about how you'd like to interpret this. Some people like kind of the Jungian explanation, or a more metaphysical explanation, emotions as energy that needs to be expressed. But if that doesn't resonate with you, it's very simple to say, if you don't have access to your feelings, you don't actually know what you need and want. You don't. You're missing all your data. And that means that you're in danger all the time. If you are constantly defending against your actual feelings, then, not to say that feelings are always 100% accurate. They're based on our beliefs, of course. So they may be totally not telling you what you need to do in that situation, but you need the data to make good decisions. And if you're operating on 10% of the data that you need, you're going to make bad decisions that are not going to serve you. And that is problematic. And your brain will let you know that this is not going to work. So that's something I think is just super important. I wanted to bring you back to the word you used. This is one that Sam uses a lot, and I'd like you to give clarification on whether allowing is a passive process or not.
So that's a really good question. No,
I didn't prepare you for that. Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's a passive process, especially
passive.
Not in the beginning. I'd say it gets easier and more intuitive, but it's not a passive process. We have to sometimes stop and actively recognize what we're feeling and where.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say we have to walk around all day, every day, checking in on our emotions and thinking, what do I feel? What do I feel? Again, this, as somebody that's very cognitive, I overthought feeling my feelings. I was constantly like, am I feeling? What am I feeling? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling anger? Am I feeling, oh, I'm doing it all wrong? Feeling your feelings is literally trying to locate in your body where the emotion is and what that feels like in your body. And just trying not to do anything with it, not fix it, not change it. Just try and allow it. And even if the resistance comes up against doing that, we then attempt to allow that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not, I'm going to add on to what you're saying, and you can tell me if you agree with me on this. To me, you have to kind of make yourself, the word that's coming to mind right now is like a receptacle, but that's not exactly what I mean. Allowing means not just, oh, I'm just going to sit here and like let it happen. Although, yes, I think that's sort of what we're saying. I like to think of it as deliberately evoking with curiosity and acceptance of this particular thing that you're allowing. So it's very much a two-way communication process between you and you, between you, what Sam will often call observer you, and then the emotion itself. But observer also implies a not passivity, but sort of like a standoffishness. And I think it, when done well, I think, and you tell me if this is a good description of how you do it, there's a warmth, there's an interest, there's a recognition. This is important data. I want you emotion. I need you. I need the data you can give me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know when it's a core emotion that you're feeling versus anxiety or perhaps another emotion that's, you know, I would now view when I feel anxious, that's a blocking emotion. That's not a true core emotion. There's a difference between when you're feeling a really core emotion, knowing that that's meaningful. And the more you do it, I think the better you get at that, at recognizing when it's something really important coming up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for indulging me on this philosophical part of our discussion, because this is going to come up a lot now because Sam's work is gaining so much traction. A lot of people on my channel are watching hers and vice versa, which is wonderful. But I think I see a lot of misunderstandings around what allowing actually means. And Absolutely. It seems important to clearly lay this out in a very practical way, like you and I just did. I think that's practical. I don't know if I think it was pretty practical, all things considered.
Yeah. And it's normal to not get it straight away. Again, I'm a psychologist and I overthought it. It's not, I still overthink it sometimes, it's just a process of, we're doing stuff we haven't done for years or ever. We're learning how to, to feel things.
And how does that change things for you? So I see, so obviously we're going to want to say for folks to hear how you're feeling physically and how well you're doing. But then also I'd love for you to share what that's actually led to. So this inner work that you've done, this allowing, this being more aware of your own needs, this self-compassion, again, whatever words we want to use for it, how that's actually changed how you operate.
I think it's given me permission to be a lot more authentic. I feel more aligned to who I am meant to be. And sometimes that's still not easy, it's a constant, it's constant, the work's constant, yes, I don't get dizzy sensations anymore, or very, very rarely but yes, I still fall into patterns of perfectionism, people pleasing, and being high achieving. And it's just now I know perhaps when to soften those parts of myself more. You know, sometimes I still want to be that person and it serves me well, but sometimes I have to recognize, why are they showing up and what are they protecting me from? And is that necessary? I think, like you say, I've just become a more curious observer of what I do and why, which is actually quite powerful, because I think I just don't, you know, I just used to say yes, yes, yes without even thinking about it. And whereas now I think I've just slowed right down. I'm just more, I think, thoughtful and intentional in how I live my life and what I do and what I engage in, you know. And I think a big part of my recovery was just learning to be a lot more present as well, and a lot more present focused, and just to, like I said, meet myself where I'm at, whatever that looks like. And I was always somebody, I think, that was trying to always chase this, chase that, chase the next high, chase the next achievement. Whereas now I've become a lot more able to not look so far ahead, not to kind of chase the next thing always. You know, there's always goals, of course, there's always things to aim for. But I think I've learned to live in the now. So again, I used to be somebody that just overplanned everything due to an anxiety, I think, of getting things wrong or it not being perfect. And that just took so much energy and time. And no wonder I was burning out all the time, or felt I didn't have enough time to engage in other activities. You know, I've got time now to do hobbies and, you know, and just things for me outside of working and being a mum. And that's just a game changer, I think. It's just, my life just feels just more meaningful, more full. And yeah, don't know what else to say about that.
Wow. You're such a remarkable person. And it's so beautiful to see you being the remarkable person that you actually are. That's what came to mind when I was hearing you say this. It's like you're fully living in Amy now. You're not just like constricted Amy, you're full Amy now. And that's just, it's I can feel it, and it's just beautiful to see. And yeah. Okay, but for the audience, they're going to want to know, what are your symptoms like now? Or are there symptoms? Are you 100% recovered? What do you consider yourself to be?
Oh, that's a good question again. When did I last have? Very rarely, very, very rarely will I experience sensations of dizziness. And if I do, they are very short-lived.
Like, sounds like normal life, because everyone has that sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. I think now, if anything, there's still a slight sensitization to normal sensations. I think, you know, I last had a few sensations maybe 6 weeks ago, but again, I was very busy. I think we had a heat wave here. I think there was, you know, there was a lot going on. And again, I think I sent a message to Sam, and her response was, "You've been served. You know what you need to do."
You've been served. That sounds like.
So yeah, I still get these thoughts, and you know, why are you here? What are you doing? Are you coming back? What are you know? And I think I know what I need to do now, and that's recovery. Yes, I will still get sensations sometimes, but yes,
that's recovered.
Exactly.
That sounds like recovered. I don't want to put that on you if you don't want it, but I'm pretty sure that does not meet any diagnostic criteria for anything. So having occasional mild sensations of dizziness once in a while when you're really stressed sounds like a normal human being. It doesn't sound like PPPD. So that is awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was one of the most enlightening and clearest discussions I think I've ever had with someone about a recovery process. That I just think that was so structured and easy to understand. And I'm really excited to hear what people think about it. So anything else you want to share, Amy? Any words of advice or support before we sign off?
Just keep going. If you're in the thick of it right now, you will get there. My brain's no different to your brain. We're human. You can do this. And yeah, reach out to me if you need any more support. Like I say, I've become an expert by experience, so I'm happy to offer anyone any advice, and just that really. You're on the right track. If you found Yoni, you're on the right track.
On the right track. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Amy. Thank you so much. And for those of you, well, actually, none of you know this. This is our second attempt at recording this interview because the first time we had a technical problem. And I am so glad we re-recorded it because this conversation is just gold. So it worked out. It worked out. Everyone here lucked out. So thank you all.
Less bloopers in this one.
Yes, fewer bloopers, and also my microphone was working. This is all like those are both good things. Well, thank you, Amy, and thank you all for tuning in. And as always, I love hearing from you. So if you're on YouTube, please leave questions and comments in the comment section below. If you're listening to this as a podcast, consider heading over to YouTube and joining the conversation. We really have a lovely comment section with lots of supportive people, and it's just nice to connect to other people who are going through this. If you could also like, share, subscribe to my channel, follow the podcast, leave us a 5-star rating. These things, again, really help me reach more people and bring messages of hope like this one. So thank you, everyone. And final thank you again to Amy. I think I've thanked you like 7 times. And we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.